Thanks, guys. So this is my first Polyglot conference. Yay for anybody else out there who is also here for the first time. It feels like a very big deal. I've been watching the Polyglot conference from afar for a long time, from Australia, which feels very far away from everything. So it was really cool to hear that it was going to be in Japan, because that for us is like really close to Australia, which might seem really weird to a lot of you, but it's all relative. So today we're going to talk about how to create practical experiences for yourself to practice the language that you're learning closer to home. And I specifically kind of mean without travelling abroad. So the reason that I am bringing this up, and I'll talk about all of the reasons very shortly, but is because immersion is a bit of a buzzword in the language learning community at the moment. I don't know, for those of you who are on social media, you may have heard a lot about immersion trips, travelling to learn a language or to improve a language, spending maybe a week or 2 weeks or several weeks in a country and using that as a fantastic opportunity to learn a language. But we can't always do that. So we're going to talk about some ways to do that for yourself closer to home. My name is Beck, or Rebecca. I don't mind which one you call me. Either is fine. I'm passionate about language learning, like so many of you. I love languages, I love learning them. I haven't actually learnt heaps. So my native language is English. I was born and raised in Australia and I still live there. But I have mostly studied French. And then as an adult, I have learnt some Italian and some German as well, which is fun. And a little bit of residual Japanese from high school, but I was not able to fully bring that back, resurrect it, so to speak, for this trip. That's okay, another time. I started a little business called Irregular Endings. I make printed goods for people who are interested in languages. So greeting cards, bilingual calendars, fun stuff that helps you to bring another language into things that you already do every day. I also co-founded a little community that we have in Australia called Language Lovers AU. It's a way of connecting Australians who are interested in languages. So kind of like the community that we have here today at the Polyglot Conference, when myself and another friend of mine who loves languages in Australia we found each other and we were like, this is the coolest. I have a friend who I can talk to about languages now. How great is that? And we were like, there's got to be some other Australians near us too who are interested in doing that. So we started a little thing called Language Lovers AU, and we run events for language lovers in Australia, people who are learning languages, meetups to just chat about language, and also we have a podcast called Language Chats if anybody is interested in having a listen to that. My day job is that I work for the Alliance Française in Melbourne. So if any of you know what the Alliance Française is, it's kind of the French Cultural Institute. I work there in the education team, although I'm not a teacher. So anyway, that's my background. I'd like to hear a bit more about you guys shortly, but we'll get there. Immersion and travel for language learning. Again, love it and think it's a fantastic idea. Everyone is talking about it at the moment, or at least that's how it feels like to me. And it's an amazing opportunity if you can do it. Now, obviously a lot of us have travelled to be here today, but I'm sure that for all of us, we've had periods of time where you may not have been able to travel. Either because it's too expensive, travelling is expensive and it does take money, but also you need time to travel too. And if you don't have leave, if you for whatever reason in your life, maybe you have a family and so it's harder to get away, it means that travel isn't always a possibility for everyone. However, that shouldn't mean that you can't practice the language that you're learning just because you can't be in a country where other people speak it too. At the same time, when you are at home and if you're learning another language that isn't spoken widely in the country that you live in, it can be quite difficult to find practical opportunities to practice either on your own or with other people in contexts that are, I suppose, when I say practical, and I'll go into this in a little more detail in a second, not just opportunities where you can use the language in ways that you would use your native language. So I don't necessarily mean like walking into a restaurant and being able to order in the language that you are learning, but also all of the other things that you do in your life that are practical and active. All of the times when you use your native language to speak or to communicate with anyone, to communicate with yourself, you might want to be able to do that in the language that you're learning also. And this is where these practical opportunities come into play. So rather than completely lamenting how long it will be until your next trip abroad, why don't you just create your own? This is something that came to me as a learner myself. I have not always been able to travel. There have been periods where I could, periods where I wasn't able to do that. And this is an idea that came up individually on my own. It's also something that I run in groups with someone else. I'll talk about that right at the end of the presentation. But these are things that you can do for yourself. You don't necessarily need to have somebody driving this for you. You can create your own practical opportunities to practice a language, potentially on your own or with others who also use the language that you're learning. So today, we're going to talk about that, how to create these practical opportunities for yourself. I'll give you a little bit of context and an example of something that I've done so that you can see what I mean by all of this, by these practical opportunities that I'm talking about. We're going to go through some questions to ask yourself first before you start organising something. Some suggested steps that I have as well to help you organise that for yourself and what to follow. And then if we've got some time at the end, I'll go through some examples of some events that we have run that are local in Australia for people who are learning languages that are of this practical and active style. A practical language learning experience. What do I mean by this? I mentioned before, when I say practical, I don't mean necessarily like going to your local Italian restaurant if you're learning Italian and trying to order with the waitresses when you, or the waiters when you walk into the restaurant, or turning up to your local Malaysian restaurant if you're learning Bahasa and trying to speak to them in Bahasa. This is more about using any kind of active experience that you already have in your life to be able to make that an opportunity to use your target language. Because realistically, we use our native language to do everything, to communicate. It's not something that we learn in exclusivity on its own. We use languages to communicate, to do other things, to think in our own minds. All of our thoughts are often in our native language. But there are also many other things that we do when we, are walking down the street. You might see something and you think, oh, what a beautiful day. Can you say that in your target language? If you go and do something else that you enjoy, could you do that in your target language? It doesn't have to be in a classroom, and it doesn't have to be in front of a screen. It doesn't have to be in front of a book. It can be with other people, and you can make choices about who those people are and who you want to get involved to have an experience that is active, to use the language that you're learning in the place where you live. So at the moment, I am learning German. I'm also kind of learning Italian too, but I'm focusing on German at the moment. So since the start of this year, where I had done some classes about 4 years ago, some just evening, 1.5 hour a week classes, nothing too intense. At the start of this year, went, no, it's my time. I'm ready to start doing some German again. I really like it. I'd been watching a TV show that was just getting me really back into German again. And so I thought, okay, that's it. I'm committing. German 2019. I really like going to my local art gallery. That's something that I just enjoy doing in my life. It's relaxing for me. It's fun. I think that it's I know that going to galleries isn't everybody's idea of fun, but it's my idea of fun. It's a beautiful place. We have a fantastic public art gallery in Melbourne, in Australia, where I'm from. It's mostly free. You can just wander in and you can walk around most of the public collections all of the time. And I just recently started a new job at the Alliance Française. And before this job, I wanted to have a day where I could just have to myself a day at the gallery doing something that I enjoy with the language that I'm learning. So what I did was I planned a session in an afternoon to go to the gallery and use that as an experience to practice my German. So I went on my own. I took some photos. Got some here. These are from my Instagram. So I have an Instagram account that's just for language learning, where I can post photos. I have kind of a language diary. If anybody here has done the Language Diary Challenge that's run by Joy of Languages, Katie Harris, yeah. So I try to follow that sometimes. And it's a way for me to be able to, just do a couple of sentences in the language that I'm learning and post a photo and something that I've done. So I've got a prompt of something that's recent and relevant to me. So I went to the gallery this day. It was a beautiful day. I walked around. I had a look at things. I used the artworks and the environment that I was in to be the prompts for how to think about some new things in German. Problem is that when you are usually, like if you do tend to study mostly at like a desk or in the same space, maybe it's in a group class, maybe it's with a tutor or another teacher, the space doesn't change much. That means that sometimes it can be hard to think of new things to say. You can forget what it's like to be sort of out in the environment and thinking things like, what a nice day, or how do I say that shape? What's the word for birds in German? What's the plural for, like, I know that it's der Vogel, but what's the plural? Is it die Vögel? Yes. So right. So like, but the point is, this is an experience where I took myself out of the regular space where I learn, out of my apartment, out of somewhere new, somewhere that I enjoy and that is fun for me and that I associate with comfort and enjoyment. And I said, this is going to be the place where I'm going to use German today. So as I'm walking around, I look at everything, I observe everything. I had a bit of a plan of things that I wanted to do, things that I wanted to see, questions to ask myself, and some vocabulary as well to help me along the way, because if I knew that there were things I was probably going to be able to say, I wanted to be able to think in my mind, I know what the word is for frame, or I know what the word is for artwork, so that I could come back later and maybe describe to somebody what I did during this day. The other thing I did at the end was that I took a little video of myself, just because I think that, I know videos can be weird and sometimes embarrassing for lots of people, but they're a really great way to track your progress in real time. So like I posted that one to Instagram. You obviously don't have to post them somewhere, but it's a nice way to go back 6 months later and then see this and go, oh, that day where I went to the gallery and I practiced my German, this is what I said that day, and I made a mistake, but I know what that mistake is now, because I tried it and I recorded it somewhere. Okay, so that's an example of something that I did. But the main thing that I want you to see from this is that I used an experience that was enjoyable to me already, not necessarily related to language, but an active, open experience is something that I enjoy regularly in my life. Because if you live in a cool city that has fun things to just see, like you don't have to pay anything. You can just go walking around the streets of your city and look at stuff that you never look at, because actually you're so busy trying to get from A to B every day to work or to meet friends or whatever, you forget to look up or to look around you or to look down or like on the walls. So in Melbourne where I live, we have lots of really cool street art, which is super fun, and that's something that we have done. Actually, all of these things, we have done some group versions of this. Again, I'll come back to that later because they involve other people, not just myself. But all examples of fun things that you can do that are super active. So what about you? Tell me, like, right, show of hands or anyone who wants to share, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Untranslated media in the target language.
Okay, untranslated media, that's awesome. Do you translate it?
No, just my own understanding.
Okay.
So like songs, TV, games.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. That's a very good example. Anyone else that wants to share something? Singing, okay, also great. Have you ever used lyrics training? Okay, awesome. Great app. Audiobooks, okay, very cool. Do you make notes while you listen to audiobooks?
I read a book while listening to it.
Okay, cool. Anyone else for things that are a little bit more, so again, don't worry about your target language so much, things that you enjoy doing in your native language as well. Yeah?
Biking around rice paddies.
Awesome. Whereabouts do you live?
Shiga.
Shiga, is that in Japan?
Like close to Kyoto.
Okay, cool, all right. Awesome, that's fantastic. Biking is great. Do you stop along the way?
Of course.
Okay. Do you think about sometimes what the environment looks like and what you're seeing? Okay, great example. We'll come back to that one in a second because I think it's a really good one. Anyone else who wants to share? Yep.
Finding music videos, subtitles in another language.
Yeah, that's also great. Fantastic. What about like things that you can go out and do? Things that are specifically like that might get you out of the house that you enjoy doing, yeah? Going to the gym, that's a good one, yeah? Sorry, hiking. Fantastic, hiking is great. Street photography, again, awesome. Okay, that's a fantastic idea, yeah? People watching. Okay, people watching, also a really good one. These are fantastic examples, really good ideas, but you can see that, so a lot of these things are just things that you enjoy doing in your spare time, right? They don't have to be language related necessarily, but they can be, because if they're things that you already do, you probably use your native language, whether that's English or another language, to process all of the thoughts and all of the things that you do to do that activity. You can do that also in your target language. I think for anything that is related to language learning, and more I think we're better at understanding this, because as we get older, and we're all almost all adults here, you realise that you don't have to do things the way that you learnt them at school. That's something that I've definitely noticed, like over time. I work now in sort of a place where we encounter lots of people who want to take classes, and you see that lots of people still feel that the only way to learn a language is the way that you did it at high school. That is not always a positive experience for many people. In fact, it can be supremely negative. And is a really sad thing, I think, as people, all of us who enjoy languages and really love learning languages, it's hard to understand why anybody would still associate bad experiences of high school language learning, maybe, with learning any language in the future. It's really sad. Every time I encounter somebody like that, I'm like, oh, sit down though, let's talk for 45 minutes. I'll explain to you why this is okay. So it's a really hard thing to get out of. But once you've realised that you don't have to use one method to learn a language, the world is open to you. And when you realise that you can use things that really interest you to learn a language too, it's even more open, because imagine that every time you're learning your language, it's barely even study. It's something that you already enjoy doing anyway, like watching TV or watching movies or going for a hike or people watching, or doing literally anything that is something that is just fun for you. And then instead of doing it in English or your native language, do it in the language that you're learning, or try to. And that's where we get to from here. It's that you don't necessarily you don't have to be able to fully conduct everything of your experience in the language that you're learning. If you're still a beginner, you're still a beginner. If you're still at A2 or B1, there are going to be things that you can't necessarily say, but that's okay, because that's part of the challenge. The second thing to ask yourself, in addition to what interests you first, is who else can you potentially get involved in this process with you who might be able to help you out. You can do this by yourself. Like I was explaining to you before with my little experience at the gallery, I did that on my own. But it is great if you can get someone else involved, ideally a teacher. So if you've got a tutor, or if you've got somebody who regularly helps you with the language that you're learning, if you can get them involved in a practical experience that you get to design, that's awesome. Alternatively, they might just be friends of yours who are native speakers. They might be a group of people, maybe your board game group, for example. Like, if they're all people who are all learning the same language or who want to practice the language with you, still a great group of people to get you to help out, because every time that you have a question, you can ask them. Also, you don't necessarily need to interrupt your current experience with the questions. You can note everything down and you can come back to it later. But as long as you've got people who can help you out and can answer your questions at some point in time. The other thing that could be cool is if you've got another learner. So somebody else who's a friend of yours, who maybe is learning too. They don't necessarily have to be an expert, but you can make a day out of this. Make an experience, something that you can do together, and then regroup with a teacher or somebody else who can help you out afterwards. But come up with your questions together, because sometimes these things are fun things to learn and laugh along the way. Make all of your mistakes in front of somebody else who is also going to make lots of mistakes, because it makes you feel a lot better when you realise that you're totally not alone. First things first, make a plan. That might seem obvious. I'm not sure. Do people think that making a plan would be an obvious thing to do in general? Shout out, tell me. No, maybe, yeah, okay. So, make a plan, definitely make a plan. I say that because you can have fully good intentions, like the best of intentions, to take yourself to the gallery and practice your German. Unless you have a plan for how you're going to do that, or at least some checkpoints of some description to say, I'm going to try and spend this much time doing this, or I'm only going to be there for 2 hours. This isn't going to be a full day of trying to think in German or in Italian or in Japanese or Filipino. This is I'm giving myself a period of time. It needs to be distinct. What other things do you think you should include on a plan if you're creating an experience for yourself where you're going to get something like a really enriching experience, an enriching language learning experience out of it? Yeah? Yeah, vocabulary is a great idea. Do you guys want me to write this up on the board?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so vocab. Or like, I don't know, I guess useful words. What else might you want to take with you or plan for yourself if you are going to create an experience like this?
Objectives and key results.
Great idea. So objectives, or maybe like we could just say goals. Like maybe if you've got a goal for the day. Like I want to be able to use the past tense of the language that I'm learning specifically in this experience. Or I want to practice the gerund, or I want to practice the present, I don't know, something. It could be anything. I want to practice describing things. Could be a good goal. What else do you think you might like to include?
You have to plan for debriefing at the end.
Debriefing, yep. Yep,
Maybe what kind of tools or supplies you're bringing when you might
great.
or you're recording yourself.
Yep. So tools and resources. Okay. What else could potentially help you stay on track?
Routine.
A routine? Yeah. So like maybe like checkpoints, a timeline.
7 times a day.
Yep. Yep.
Maybe we can rules for yourself.
Yep. Rules for yourself. Let's maybe rules,
For example,
guidelines. Let's say guidelines. Okay. That's a pretty good list. Anyone else got anything else to add that you think might be helpful?
Things to encourage yourself to get, like,
Yep. Like a reward. I like rewards. Okay, no punishments, only rewards. Okay. Okay, anything else that anybody else wants to add? Reminders, okay. Reminders for during or after? Both? Okay. Both a good idea, I think. Reminders to remind you of the experience as well, maybe, and things that you should take away as well, maybe. Okay. Anyone else got anything else to add on this one? Here, right at the back. Sorry, say that again? Practice with the locals, absolutely. If you do have people who you can practice with, so like if you live in an area where there are people who will happily practice with you, absolutely, for sure. Although if you don't have locals to practice with, like, not totally essential if you don't live in a place where there are people you can practice with. Okay, so the other thing I would say that isn't quite what we've got in here, although it's sort of covered by objectives and goals, is be really specific if you can be. I do like plans that have lots of detail. That's just the kind of person that I am. But I also think that stuff like that really helps you to, when you've got a list of things that you know you want to do and they're very specific, they're not kind of broad sweeping, I'm going to go to the gallery and I'm going to spend some time there and I'm going to think in some German. Like, that's probably not specific enough to help keep you on track. If you have steps and things that you want to follow, then you will stick to it. Because as soon as you start going, maybe this is a bit too hard, you can just try the next step and like see how you go. So preparing yourself with, we've got a goal, awesome. Checkpoints, we already talked about that too. A timeline, we spoke about that, but again, I would say be as specific as you can for something like this. Really depends on what you're doing, but maybe like in your sort of cycling example, like if you stop every 15 minutes or something for a moment, it's like you get 15 minutes of just thinking and hanging out and doing something before you go, okay, now I'm going to do something in my target language that's going to make me think about some new things. I'm going to look at the environment around me, or I'm going to talk with my friend who I'm writing with, or whatever that might be. Same thing if you're like going to the gym and you like to do that in your target language, then it's the same kind of thing. You can kind of do it in between exercising, like repetitions or something. But it will help keep you on track. Key vocab, we talked about that too, definitely really helpful. I think with this sort of thing, it's nice to have some stuff to fall back on. I like to include both, so all parts of language, even just a really short group, like it doesn't have to be lots, it can be like 5 words each, but like 5 verbs, 5 adjectives, 5 nouns. Things just to get you started so that if you just lose everything and you're like kind of like, oh, I can't think of anything in my target language, then you're like, no, I've got some sentence starters to get me going. Reward yourself. No, like really do that. I think that because I think that all of this, like, if you're going to do something like this anyway, number one, awesome that you're learning a language to begin with, like that's the coolest. But if you're going to go and make an experience for yourself that's like this and that's fun and that's something that you're going to enjoy, reward yourself for doing this, because like this is going to take you a little bit of time to organise, but it'll be so worth it at the end. So whatever your experience might be, like when I go to the gallery, I'm going to get myself a coffee and a cake at the end, because I'm going to like make sure that I'm rewarding myself for doing some practice for the language that I'm learning, and I enjoyed it too. It was fun. It was something that in my life was enjoyable and good. So finally, clear planning is not about being restrictive. This is not about holding you back in any way. It's mainly just saying, like, keep yourself on track, follow your steps, don't get distracted by something else and then go, oh, why did I procrastinate and not actually go through with that experience? You had some steps, you can follow them. This, again, might sound like a really simple thing to say, but do it. So once you've planned this cool thing, do go and do it. Don't just plan it and then, like, forget about it. Do it and then also document it. And this comes to something that was just mentioned before. I am a huge, huge fan of writing things down on paper. I appreciate all of the benefits of technology, but I love tangible things that I can hold and flick through and write on and scribble and draw things, and that is just the way that my mind works. I think for lots of other people that can be very similar. There are studies on showing that your memory your retention of information can be significantly better when you handwrite notes as opposed to typing them. So in the context of that idea, what do you think you should do to try and document this? Anyone? Yeah? Vlogs. Sorry? Vlogs? Vlog is great. So like any kind of video really. So like vlog or really videoing of any kind. Yeah. Tweet, yeah. Yeah. Tweeting is good. I'm going to add to this as well, like photos. Yeah, yep. Hang on. So let's go tweet, photos, really any kind of social media or like however your platform of choice. It was a notebook. I love notebooks. I have so many. Yep. Yep. Great idea. Okay, we'll say real photos. Not to suggest that phone photos are not real photos, but we'll say real photos. Actually, I really like that, like an Instax. Like, yeah. So like kind of like a Polaroid. That is awesome. The other thing you can do is, of course, like whatever photos you might take on a camera or on your phone or whatever, you can always print them out afterwards and stuff too. I would suggest annotating. We'll come to that next. But real photos, great idea. Yeah?
I just have a log.
Yeah, cool. So like kind of your like notebook, I guess. You've got like a bit of it. What do you write in your log?
Well, it has which language, what I did, and how long.
I love that. That's such a cool idea. Do you also do that for really any activity that you do in the languages that you're learning?
Any separate activity.
Okay, so next to log, I'm just going to say like tracking. That's something that I also really am a big fan of in language learning in general. If any of you have never tried tracking, just like even if it's just for a month or for a couple of weeks, tracking what you do every day in the language, or what you do every couple of days or once a week or whatever in the language that you're learning, it is a really good exercise to do just to remind yourself of how much you've done. I think we forget, especially if you do, it's great to do something daily, but if you can't fit something in daily, even if you do it every second day, every third day, once a week, that is still something, and it's better than nothing. And it's important to remind yourself that that's a thing. You did that. You didn't just you could have done anything else, and you decided to spend some time learning the language that you're learning. That's really cool, and you should remind yourself of it. So I think that's a really good idea. Anyone else got any other suggestions? Yep. Yeah.
in your target language, and then you can have native speakers ready for you as well.
Okay, so like a diary or a kind of, I guess, a recount.
It's like a notebook, but it's on the website, on italki, on your
Okay, that's cool. So that is a great suggestion. It also comes into kind of the next bit. Grocery lists. I've done grocery lists too. Yeah, so I guess in documenting this, potentially if you were, so one of the photos that was up there before was actually from a market. I love going to markets, like fresh food markets in places where I travel in my home city too. But I love seeing all the fresh produce and everything that is there, all the bountiful things that we have. And I think that's where for example, a shopping list can really come into play in what you do and how you document it, because that might be part of what you're following, right? That's part of your plan. If you have a recipe and you're you might want to write down all of your ingredients in the language that you're learning, and then you use that as you walk through the market. My first thing that I would say is maybe if you have a plan, print it out or write it down, maybe in your notebook, handy dandy notebook. I, again, love using my phone, and I do use it all the time. However, I would say it kind of sucks when you're walking around and trying to do something you're trying to focus on. Sometimes it can be very annoying to have to look at your phone all the time. It is still really good, but if you have the opportunity to write out your plan and your timeline and your goals and the things, your vocabulary and stuff into something that is hard copy, I would suggest it, mainly because you can also then annotate it. So when we're talking about having potentially Instax photos or something that you can pop in there, it's nice to be able to underline things and highlight words, or realise that you did something wrong and cross it out, or if you see something that you want to work out later, what was that? Have a vocab side of a page where you can just note down words. You're I don't know what that is in my target language, but here are all of the things that I thought along the way that I wanted to be able to say. So it is nice to have a hard copy version. I would also suggest observe as much as possible. And it's kind of what I was mentioning before about sometimes when you walk through your city and you don't realise all of the things that you miss every day when you're walking to work or going to meet friends. Try to seek out the things that you regularly miss and think about your thoughts. So all of the things that you think in English when you're walking around a city, or when you're, English, in your native tongue, all of those things that you are thinking are ways of using language that you might want to use your target language to, so be very, very conscious of them. And then documenting as much as possible. So lots of what we've got here and some very good suggestions, all about taking notes, new words, new vocab, things to look up later, all of the things especially that I just mentioned before about the things that you couldn't say but you wanted to be able to. I went to an event last year where, because of my little business, sometimes I go to cultural events in my city where we have a big Italian festa towards the end of the year before Christmas. And I had been spending a fair bit of time on Italian last year when I went to this thing, and so I was cool, I'm gonna talk to some people in Italian during my day, and they're gonna come and buy stuff and it'll be really awesome, and I'll be buongiorno. And then there were a billion things that I couldn't say but I really wanted to be able to, and I got home at the end of the day and I was exhausted from standing up from 9 till 9 talking to people and hanging out. And I got home and the first thing I did was I was how do I say have a good Christmas? Or how do I say oh, I've only been doing this for a few years? Or how do I say, actually, this is what I work as in my day job, or like, you know, little things that people ask you about. You say buongiorno, and then suddenly everybody's like, oh, you speak Italian, great, I'm going to launch into conversation. I was like, no, I don't have any of the answers to that. But it was a great way for me to go, oh gosh, I wish I could have said this and this and this and this and this. And so then afterwards, they were the first things that I was like, all right, when I next have some time to spend on Italian, they're all of the things I'm going to look up how to say. Take photos and videos, all great. Would definitely recommend the videos, and I think vlogs are great if that's the kind of thing that you do. But also do remember, you don't have to share them anywhere. Even just taking videos of yourself that you keep only for yourself and you save to a Google Drive, and you can just go back in 6 months' time or in 12 months' time and go like, yeah, I did that video and I'm better now. Then that's still great. You don't have to post them anywhere, but if you want to post them on Instagram, there are lots of really nice people who will help correct you. Okay, and that's legitimate. Instagram is awesome and people are so nice. The language learning community, that is. Okay, so the next thing after all of this is you've got to review what you did. You can't do an experience like this and just like let it go and be like, oh, I like just did this cool thing and now I'm done and I finished it and I ticked off all the things on my list and I took all these photos, but I'm never going to look at it ever again. Because what a waste. You can always come back. There's so many things that you can take from that and then continue to learn or use them as things to help you learn more things. It's all stepping stones. And reviewing is a really, really important part of that process. What do you think are important things that you might need to do to review? Yeah? Yeah. That's a great idea. So new vocab into Anki. Or similar, any kind of, whether you like doing real, like actual flashcards or digital ones. Yep. Vocab you missed, yep, so what we've just talked about. So, or I kind of like to call it gap vocab. It's like sometimes you've got like most of the sentence but not quite all of it. Teach someone. That's a great idea. So teach someone else something that you learnt. Something that I'll add to that I think is also great is recounting someone what you did. So recounting to someone what you did. So telling them, going back and using the process of saying, okay, let's move everything that I did into the past tense of whatever language I'm learning and say, on Sunday, I decided to go to wherever. This is what I did. This is how much time I spent. And then use it in a real practical way to tell another friend about what you've done. Anyone else? Yeah?
Maybe like expressions or words, phrases you use a couple of times too many.
Okay. Overused phrases or words. All really good suggestions and great things to do. I particularly like your one about going over things that you've used too much. I think I do that all the time. Firstly, review solo always. I think when you get to the end of this on your own, especially if you haven't done it with someone else, go back and remind yourself that you did a great job, but really go through everything you wrote down, everything you noted, and remember that there are gaps to be filled. Ask your teacher, make your list of the things that you want to check afterwards. Keep this somewhere and make sure that this is documented in a way that you can find it again later, because you're going to want to come back to this, but also keep it to be able to look back in 6 months' time or in 12 months' time and say, oh, this was this cool thing that I did. Then I would suggest, if you can do it, but it's just a really good thing to do. If you have somebody else who you can check with, whether it is your teacher online, in person, or otherwise, review this together with someone else. So anybody else who you might be able to help you fill your gaps, it's a really good extra step. Okay. And look, that's basically it. Again, I hope that this has been really helpful to you. This is kind of just a very skeleton way of saying, look, there are lots of ways to do this. This is a little bit of a framework. I think it's fairly straightforward, but you can use anything that you already enjoy in your life that you do to also practice the language that you're learning. Okay? So go out there, do some fun stuff. And I hope that was helpful for you.